listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana, founders of the Life Coach Method. Each one of our uplifting and deep dive episodes is geared to help you tackle the things that hold you back from having the most magnificent life you deserve. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be coached.
Hey guys, welcome to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. My fabulous guest today is TJ Woodward, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm just so grateful to be here with you, Callie. And you know what? The introductions, who needs introductions? I'd rather just dive into the conversation with you.
I used to do introductions, and then I found out I would rather have such a flowy conversation that most people with ADHD are like, I don't want to hear your bio. I don't care. I want to hear what you have to say. So they started like fast forwarding through this section anyway. And I'm like, let's just introduce you. And really, you don't need an introduction. So.
Well, thank you for that. And nor do you. Isn't that amazing?
I know. We just walk in and we're like, I'm here. So tell me what you're up to. Tell me what's going on. You've got all these projects happening, and I'd like to get the word out of all the stuff fabulous stuff you're doing. So let's talk about it.
Well, the first thing that I want to talk about is the most recent project, and that's my new talk show, Unharmable. You were a guest on the show. Our episode is coming out very soon. I'm very excited about that. It's a conversation with thought leaders, coaches, counselors, therapists, spiritual leaders about discovering that place within ourselves that is unharmed and unharmable as a starting point to our healing and as a total game changer on how we view ourselves in the world. And it came from my own story of feeling broken for so many years, well into my recovery. I felt damaged, I felt broken. And guess what, Callie? That's how I experienced the world because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. We talked about that on your show and how your idea came about from something you experienced, which I think anything we create from something we've been through is so powerful because it's like, I've been there and I want to make a solution or I want to solve this pain point for a lot of people. So your story was very powerful. So I commend you.
Well, thank you. I mean, so many different layers and levels to that. The deepest level was when sometime around the age 40. So I got sober when I was 20. So 20 years sober, 40 years old. I was living my fabulosity and I had a successful business. I pause when I say successful because it was successful, but I was also getting deeper and deeper in debt and kind of unwilling to look at that, right? I'm like, no, I need to be in my fabulosity. I had the house on the hill. I had the hot boyfriend. I had the Lexus. I had all that stuff. And I had this moment, Callie, and you and I talked about this at coffee recently, where I was like, is this all there is? There's got to
Yeah.
be more. And I had been, as I said, in recovery. I had been on a journey of spirituality. I'd been part of New Thought communities. And I had this calling to do deeper work in the world. And once I said yes to that, everything collapsed. I'm happy to give details, but everything collapsed and it provided an opportunity for me to go even deeper at that point in my life.
What's one thing, because my show's about unpause your life, what's one thing when that happened that you were like, I don't want to let go of this thing? What was the one thing that you were like, I know this is toxic for me, and I know that for my healing journey to go up, I've just got to let go? What was that one thing for you, that pivotal turn?
Well, the pivotal turn for me was having been around enough to know that when something comes deeply from inner wisdom and intuition and inner knowing, that there's something to yield to. And there's a term called chemicalization. And chemicalization is when your level of consciousness rises above the current experience in the three-dimensional world. That's what happened for me. I realized there was something more for me. And because of that, the chemicalization is everything not like it crumbles. So I was actually in the midst of that, Callie, really grateful. It got really painful. It ended up in this legal situation. It ended up me having to make a pivotal choice that was really like I knew. There were actually three moments I can speak to, but one of them was I know in this moment that I have to lay my head on the pillow and live with myself the rest of my life. And I had this moment of choosing where to go, and it was just really powerful for me.
So what was that moment when you were there? Like what tell us how you felt. Tell us how you what you experienced. For me, it was when I'd lost my fitness company, had $4 million
Mhm.
in my bank account, and I had
Mhm.
zero when I lost the fitness company. All my stuff burned up in a fire, and here I am at Christmas squatting in a house with no heat, no running water, and I was like, fuck. I mean, that was my pivotal, how did I get here moment, and what do I do? So tell us about that for you. What was that feeling like?
Yeah, so I had this business, super successful, lots of debt, like I said, pretending that everything was fine. And again, just a reminder, I'm 20 years sober, active in my recovery. I had been on a spiritual journey, and I had this idea that like I needed to look good. And there was this moment where I understood that there was something much deeper. When I said yes to it, I went back to school, everything crumbled. And here was one pivotal moment. I'm like, I'm not going to give up. That business closed very dramatically. There was some negative press written about me because people were owed money. I mean, for you to say your bank account was zero, I'm like, I would have loved a zero bank account. Mine was like negative 500,000 or something with the kind of debt that I was carrying, right? So I went through this moment and I just went and started another business because I was like, no, my ego wouldn't let go. This other business I ended up selling to my best friend, and we're going to use air quotes. He had been my friend for over 25 years. In the midst of all of this, he relapsed, started drinking, ultimately closed the business and claimed that I had defrauded him. And the pivotal moment was my lawyer said to me, you have two choices. One, you're going to throw him under the bus, or two, you're going to throw yourself under the bus. And I sat and I said, there's really no choice for me. I will take the fall. I will take the heat. And I want to be clear. It's not like I didn't have a part in this. I sold this business out of fear. I was hoping that he would make it work. There was a lot of debt already starting. So the same pattern was happening, right? What's that definition of insanity? Doing the
Doing
same
it
thing
over
over
and
and over
over.
again and
Yep.
expecting different results, right? So I kind of put that business on him out of fear, and ultimately it ended up being a very difficult thing. And I ended up, believe it or not, going to jail for 108 days, 20 something years sober. But there was inner freedom. Now, we
Hmm.
could do a whole show on that experience, and one day I'm going to write about it and talk about it more. But I knew that my conscience, also my consciousness, but I knew that if I were to have thrown him under the bus, I would have to live with myself. And ultimately, he ended up passing away before we made peace. And I was at peace. I was at peace with him. And I imagined that moment that I found out that he had died. I thought, if I would have thrown him under the bus and then he died, how would I live with that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's heavy because your inner knowing was this is going sideways. If I sell it, I'm going to save myself. And then you went, wait a minute, what am I doing? And then you took that ownership and you cleared that karma, if you will,
that's
with
right.
the universe, with, the powers that be. And you said, I'm going to own this, I'm going to handle this, and I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's huge
Well,
because
because I knew there was something way more important. There was something so much bigger. I had signed up. I'd gone back to school to become a spiritual teacher. I did a 5-year program. I'm like, how can I actually say that I'm going to become this spiritual teacher and help people break the cycle of addiction and help them be more conscious if I'm going to do something so unconscious? And so, yeah, there was no choice. And my lawyer said, people don't say that. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but regardless of the outcome, I need to be accountable and I need to do the quote unquote right thing. I realized at that point, people perceive it however they perceive it. There are people who still believe I did all these crazy things, and I will, that's fine. That's fine because I know the truth. And ultimately, I live with myself at the end of the day,
I always say your opinion of me is none of my business because it's
for
not,
sure.
right? I can't build an empire and help a lot of people if I'm concerned with how you perceive me. That's on you. If I can sleep at night and I do the right thing and I know I'm doing the right thing will always work out. And we see that. We see that happen.
Yeah,
And
and the
now,
thing is, when we get the more we're in the public eye, the more people project onto us and perceive things that are happening, and that's just it comes with the territory. And honestly, Callie, that kept me small for many years because I was afraid to step into a bigger spotlight or have a bigger audience. And my mentor, Mary Helen, when she passed away, she said, "You are so extroverted." She's right. And you're going to take this message to a much bigger audience. And I could actually feel the energetic torch being passed. And at that point, I thought, who am I not to? So if I stay small, it's not going to serve the world. I have to step into my own greatness. And I don't mean my own greatness like that's not true for everyone. All of us had this greatness. That's who we've come here to be. I was playing small because of my own fear.
And that, let me just stop for a second. Playing small because of your own fear. What if they don't like me? What if I'm not authentic, my authentic self? What if I'm, imposter syndrome? What if I can't step into these shoes that I just put out there? What if people see through me? What if, all of these what ifs? And I've always said you can't play in what if. If you're authentically yourself, you will be loved and you will be hated, and that's okay. And that means you're doing the right thing. And I tell people I'm polarizing. I just did a post on LinkedIn. It was a photo of me in a lobby, and it was all about substance use disorder. And I had an eating disorder coach go, "Stop selling skinny." Wasn't even the message. And I'm like, ooh, wow. Like, just so it's that unresolved issue someone else has. And you're so good with that. You're like, nope, not today. That's not my circus. It's not my monkeys. Great boundaries, which leads me into this, your conscious recovery movement. How did you go from, okay, I'm shifting from this company, I'm shifting from this into I want to make this impact on the world? Where was that? Where'd you go?
Well, it's so fascinating. And I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly, but honestly, I was in jail for 108 days. And during those 108 days, I had already had the calling to go into doing spiritual work. I had already completed my program at that point. I have to literally write down the timeline at some point because some of it's a little fuzzy. But at that point, I had already completed my schooling. I had already started working in the behavioral health field. I was working at a treatment program when all of this went down unexpectedly. And during those 108 days, and for those of us who do any kind of chanting or meditation, japa mala, the beads that you used, you do your mantra 108 times. And it was out of a bad movie. I was like marking off the days I was in there, and 108 days doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot, right? It was a
Yeah.
lot. And when I found out that I was leaving on the 108th day, I had realized that I had actually used that time, one, to be of service, which we can talk about, but two, to really be with what is mine to do and who have I come here to be. And at the end of those 108 days, I knew I was writing a book. I knew what the book was. I knew that I was starting a show. I started a TV show at that point called Awakened Living. I had already started a spiritual community, and I knew that I wanted to like continue this path. And ultimately, I created conscious recovery partially out of that experience.
The coolest thing I think you've said so far, and I want to point this out to our listeners, is you went from having the hot boyfriend, the big house on the hill, and the big Lexus, and look at me, look at me, look at me,
Yeah.
to going, it's got nothing to do with this. It's the inner me that I want people to connect to, not what I own or what I drive or what I'm wearing. And that's a complete 180. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't a short little thing. It was like, let's lose everything and let's refigure out who we are, which is really, really cool. So I got to commend you for that because that's hard.
Thank you. There's a Rumi quote, and this is a paraphrase, but he said something like, "Be bold and destroy your reputation." And like that, when I read that quote, I'm like, I get what that means, or at least I thought what that meant was, as long as I'm focused on how people perceive me and the reputation that I have, I'm living from it a false sense of self. And because I had a deepening that was required of me, that deepening was also a big part of that was to let go of the illusion of how people viewed me and honestly to literally destroy my reputation. And in the midst of that, there was this 172-hour period, Callie, where I knew that I needed to be with myself for 72. I didn't know it was going to be 72 hours. I said, I will be with myself. I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm going to close the curtains and I'm going to stay here until the transformation happens. And at the end of 3 days, literally in my tiny little San Francisco apartment, because I'd gone from the big house on the hill to a very tiny 300 square foot garden apartment, which I loved because it represented freedom. But I stayed with myself for 72 hours and ultimately was in the fetal position sobbing, and there was a breakthrough. And that breakthrough was a recognition that I'm not the externals, that there is this place of unharmability. And I went from an intellectual understanding about these concepts I'd been working with for 20 years into an embodiment of them.
Now go back to that 72 hours for me, because this is the piece people avoid when you're alone with yourself with no phone and no TV and you're just sitting. All this stuff comes up and everybody gets freaked out, right? Oh, this idea, I should be doing something, I need to be in motion. What about this? They don't know how to just be. So tell me from a conscious perspective, what's one thing that a listener right now can do to bridge that fear of, oh my God, I need to be in motion. I need to be doing. I'm always in action, and just the sitting still for a second. Give us
Well,
some.
I want to frame it by like I knew I was ready. So there has been a place in my evolution, my recovery, my therapy journey, my wellness journey, whatever we call it, where community was important, and I couldn't or I didn't believe I could be with myself. But there was something about that moment where I knew I was ready, and as afraid as I was, honestly, to have the breakthrough because it started with getting an email that just activated all of this stuff and all this anger. And I was going to write the angry email. And again, keep in mind, I'm 20 years sober. I had just gone to school and gotten this, finished this program of spiritual leadership. And here I am just angry. And I just knew that there was something there that required a deeper healing. And so to be with myself and to feel everything and to not use a device or a TV or anything and just be with myself for 72 hours, something really transformational happened.
That's awesome. So how did you came up with this conscious recovery concept? How did you go from, I have all this training, I have all this stuff, I'm still not well, and now I'm starting to feel well? Where did this idea come from?
Well, it started with when I started working in the behavioral health field in 2008. I started developing groups, and I was really aware that I wanted to infuse spirituality with addiction treatment, and not the kind of spirituality that's present, for example, in 12 step, where you find a higher power. I think that's wonderful. I was talking about something much deeper, about consciousness, about how I perceive the world is how I experience the world. And I was very, very aware in creating this curriculum that I was facilitating in treatment that people change through experience. People change by understanding something that's an embodiment, not just a teaching. And I watched the way treatment was being delivered. We psychoeducational. We're teaching clients something. We're activating the mind, but there's something much deeper in that embodiment. So that's really where it started, and then keep in mind that the whole experience of the fall came after that. Even though I had let go of that business, it took like 3 or 4 years for this process to actually come to a head, if you will. And when during that time I realized again the inner knowing, getting quiet enough to listen, and I had written my first book, Conscious Being, and I knew that conscious recovery was not only a book within me, but also a curriculum, a workbook, and so that's where it started, and it came out in 2017.
So for the listeners who are new to this concept, give us like the Clip Notes version of what you get if they come into a rehab and it has the conscious recovery workbook and the teachings. What are they learning?
So, the foundational principle of conscious recovery is underneath all addictive behavior or mental health concern is an essential self that is whole and perfect. And when I started in the field, I would listen to clinicians talk about clients through this lens of brokenness, through a diagnostic lens, what's broken about them, the disease model of addiction. We moved in 1935, we moved from you're a bad person to you're a sick person. That was a big move. But I came in asking the question, what if that's not the whole story? So rather than debate whether it's a disease or not, what I know is that it's a response to pain. And so conscious recovery acknowledges that at our essence, our core, there's a place that's unharmed and unharmable. And also, how do we heal the root causes? And I identify the root causes as unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame.
So if you're listening to my show, you know this aligns with me because I hate labels and I hate the substance use disorder label and will die on that hill. Because once you own a label, you become what you've labeled yourself.
Right.
So, this fits in with my brand and what I'm doing. And this is why I love TJ so much, because there's very few people in this space of addiction and mental health that are willing to stand up and say, wait a minute, once you say, oh, I'm bipolar, or oh, I'm an addict, or oh, I'm a this, you become whatever you've just labeled yourself.
That's
And
right.
then you
And yeah,
follow the pattern. Go
right.
ahead.
And beyond that, and this is where I think you and I are really, I'm excited to collaborate with you more because it actually, in so many ways, happens with the clinician
Oh,
because
yeah.
the clinician is trained to diagnose and treat. And because we're in the Western medical model of what are your symptoms and how do we eradicate them, we don't often get down to what's actually happening. We're just like, substance use disorder bad, right? And we thought we were just moving so far from saying we're no longer going to call you an addict or an alcoholic. Now we're going to say you have a disorder. So we've gone from you have this thing to you're disordered in some way. What if that's not true? What if I call addiction a brilliant strategy because it literally saved my life when I was 14. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't discovered drugs and alcohol and 7 years of a low level search for connection until I got sober. So the clinician, because we know what quantum mechanics is now measuring what we've known, the observer has an effect. So if I'm sitting with you, and let's say, Kelly, you're the client, and I'm nodding my head, but while you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, it could be this disorder, it could be that disorder, it could be this defective character, right? And that is literally infused into the conversation. And
Hmm.
all I'm asking people to do is open up to a different possibility. What if that's not the whole story? What if that's not actually true?
And I think I've been a little bit more in your face than you have. You're a little bit
Yes, you
more
have.
warmer. I'm more like, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something, let's do blood work and let's figure out your coping mechanism. I've been a little bit more open about that, and anti DSM as a clinician. And I've got the PhD saying, why are we using this book from 1940 to figure out what's wrong with you in 5 minutes without knowing the whole picture? Like, let's talk about how you feel inside and what's causing this and get to the root. If you fix the root cause of something, the label doesn't matter. Now
That's
you don't
right.
need a label.
And what I love about that is the DSM, and I will acknowledge that maybe I have a little gentler way of saying it, but I think you're a badass, and I really love that. I know you're an Enneagram 8. All my favorite people are women who are Enneagram 8s. They're just all around me. I just love it because you're just going to cut right through it. But the DSM, the way we come up with the diagnosis is through a cluster of symptoms. And so if you have two of these symptoms and three of these for more than 6 months, we label it as this thing. The intention is to be able to help someone. Unfortunately, what happens is we start to see that's who they are. And I know you and I have looked at someone's chart and they've gone to 6 different treatment programs and they have 6 different diagnoses. And this poor person is trying to figure out what's wrong with them. And then people like us come in and say, what if there's nothing wrong with you? What if all of this is a response to your pain, to your trauma, to
Yes.
your unresolved past? And what if you can actually heal? Why is that groundbreaking? Why is that controversial in our field? What if you can heal?
Well, I think because the DSM was commissioned by the FDA, and then we have all this so we make here's your diagnosis, here's your medication, here's your diagnosis, here's your medication. And I say to people, you don't need a medication. You need behavioral modification. You need to sit with yourself and say, what parts of me don't I like? And let's change it. You have the power to change it. And a lot of people don't think they do. I think it starts there, where it's like, I have to go to a doctor, I have to go to a therapist so they can tell me what's wrong with me.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so this is awesome. And I love talking about this. I want to bring you on for a part two where we dive more into like the deep consciousness and as clinicians and spiritual workers, how we get into this with a client and what that actually looks like.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So,
the first thing I know we're going to do a part two, but the first thing is, as a clinician or as a therapist or a coach or a counselor, how am I viewing my client? And here's the key, and this is probably going to be our part two conversation. I can only, and I'm going to use this language consciously, it's not what I actually believe, but I can only allow my client to go as deeply in their healing process as I've gone myself. So if I believe I'm broken on some level, which I did for many years, there's no way I can look at you and say, you can heal this, Callie. That's not who you are. There's an essential place that's never been harmed. What does that create? We constantly say, she's not ready to address her trauma. And if we believe we're broken, that's true. But what
yes.
if there's a place that's not harmed? What if there's a place of essential wholeness? What if that's our starting point? Then you have the capability. And of course, not everyone's always ready at every moment to heal their trauma. I'm not suggesting that everyone is, but this paradigm where they're just not ready keeps everyone so stuck.
Yep. And you're right. And it's that revolving door.
Yeah.
So we are out of time. Will you tell our listeners where they can find you? Where can they find you? We're going to put all the show notes up so they can come to your website and get your books and workbooks. But where are you?
TJWoodward.com. You'll find everything there, including my new talk show and my books, workbooks, and everything else.
Awesome. And we'll put all that up for you guys and you'll be able to access it, and stay tuned for part 2 because it's going to get interesting. Thank you for listening to Unpause Your Life. My guest today was TJ Woodward.
Thank you for listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana. Head over to www.thelifecoachmethod.com to learn more about coaching yourself and how to become a master coach.